Hello humans, it is I, Mr. Bell, and I am very excited because today is going to be the first day that we really start working on our gargoyle sculptures kind of in earnest, and we start this first real summative assignment that we're going to have. Remember, hopefully you got your clay. If you do not have any of the materials, you really need to speak up right now at this moment. We'll figure out maybe some alternative stuff that you can do. But man, oh man, if you don't have any clay, you're gonna be missing out. Okay, so I've already made the basic shape of my gargoyle. Notice I have my gargoyle guy here in front of me, and this shape right here is essentially a pinch pot, right? So I'm just kind of pinching this out, and I'm going to show you how I did this here in a second, but this is going to be the basic shape of my gargoyle's head. It's going to be like this, and notice that this is empty right now, and that there's like a big hole in the top of it, right? And that's fine. I'm going to make kind of a lid for this that I'm going to seal onto this afterwards, and then I'm just going to poke a little hole right here, and that will make it so that this is hollow when we fire it. Remember, it has to be about this thick when we fire it. That just makes it a lot safer in the sense that you don't want yours to blow up and wreck everybody else's. But I think it's going to be orientated about like this. It's still kind of rough, and that's fine. I'm going to add a lot of details to this later, but this is going to be basically what I make today. Especially if your gargoyle is going to have kind of a larger head like mine. You probably want to start with the head. You might want to use this technique for like your gargoyle's body, maybe going forward, and that's awesome if you want to use this technique for like your whole guy. You can really make it using any of these techniques I'm going to go over. But this one really is, this first one is basically making a pinch pot that's going to be kind of in the shape of the head you want for your gargoyle. So I'm going to leave this guy, my finished for today, part to the side, and I'm going to open up some of my clay. Remember, this is stoneware. If you are a person that is going to go try to buy your own clay, remember, you cannot go to Hobby Lobby to get clay. I know that yesterday when we were just playing with clay, I was using some clay that I had gotten from Hobby Lobby, or not Hobby Lobby, Michael's. And it was fine to play with, but I would never throw that clay that I had from there in the kiln. It's just not high enough quality, and I would be concerned that it might blow up. Your Michael's and your Hobby Lobbies, their clay is terrible. This I got in Arvada. There is a clay store in Thornton. It's probably 10-15 minutes away from your house, maybe. But if you are doing it, make sure you're getting, this is called stoneware clay, and it is called Cone 10. The person at the ceramic store will definitely know what you're talking about when you say you want a Cone 10. A cone is a thing that we use in kilns, and when it melts, that means that the kiln has been to the right temperature for long enough to fire the clay. They're like chemically engineered little indicators for when we use the kiln to fire this clay. But I got my clay here, good to go. Got this from a Fancy Paints ceramic store. I'm going to cut off a chunk about that big, just using my handy dandy wire tool for that. You might be used to using like piano wire with two sticks to cut it, but I like using the wire more. So I'm going to use about this much clay to make a shape very similar to this. But before I even think about working my clay, I am going to close up my clay bag. Remember, this bag is your home ec baby. You got to keep it safe and care for it. Squeezing out as much of the air that I can in this bad boy. Being real careful of this bag, not leaving it around on the floor or something. If a little scratch gets into this and pokes a hole, it'll wreck your clay, even a hole that you can't really even see. So I'm just really protective of this bag. Before I even began, I made sure I grabbed another baggie. This is what I'm going to store. The stuff that I'm still working on, I'm going to store it in this baggie. If I make it a little bigger and it doesn't fit into this bag, I'm going to use a bigger baggie. But for now, you want it to be about the same size as what you're actually working on. That will keep less air around it, which will make it dry out slower. So, first thing I'm going to do, when I always work with clay, is I'm going to give it a pinch, see if it cracks or if it wiggles. And this clay could definitely use some moisture. I'm also going to work it a little bit just to make sure I get all of the air bubbles that may be in there. There probably really isn't any, because this is pretty high quality clay, but there might be, and I want to make sure I get them out. But I'm also going to use this opportunity to add some water. Hopefully you can see that. Just taking 2 fingers, dipping it in the cup, and dripping it. You want to maybe make a reservoir about that much, I think will probably be good. Then you just fold her on in. Give it a good flatten, and then fold it in half. Give it a good flatten. Fold it in half. You know, you want to do that a couple times. Really work that moisture in there. I think this could use a little bit more water. And fold it a couple more times. Remember with clay, you don't want to overwork it. You got to find this balance that is like you work it enough to get it, like the air bubbles out, and you work it enough to get it in the shape that you want it, but you don't want to overwork it. Any unnecessary wiggling of it will make the clay stiffer and stiffer and harder to work with until the point where it's basically just wrecked. I think that might be a little bit more clay. Yeah, probably about there. So I'm going to start trying to make this form again, which is, you know, just a pinch pot. You made these probably in grade school. I'm going to take my thumbs, press them in, kind of start working it around, kind of getting a uniform thickness to the clay. At this point in between my fingers, that's about as thick as you want this to be. You want enough that you can still manipulate it, right? Or if you want to like push a little bit into it, you can. But you also want to make it thin enough that it won't explode in the kiln. You always have to be thinking about that ultimate firing process. And for you guys, when you make this, we're definitely, Mr. Vartabedian and I are going to definitely make you able to fire these so you can keep them. Unfortunately, we won't be able to use glaze in this remote time just because glaze is not toxic, but it's definitely not something that you really want to send out of the classroom. You definitely don't want like the chemicals that are in those glazes. You don't want them in your living room, that's for sure. So kind of forming it out. I think this is getting a little big for my taste. This opening right here, because I'm thinking about this guy's neck and how thick I want that to be. And I'm also thinking about how like this tapers up like that. So since this is getting bigger, and I think this opening I want it to be smaller than here, I'm really just going to start kind of folding this over itself, kind of like that, and then pinching it out again, kind of working my way into like this, the form that I'm really looking for. You know, you just got to play around with it a little bit. Squeeze it in there. Give this guy a fold. And I don't really care what the interior of this looks like. It's not something that anybody's going to really see. But I don't want any like jagged edges in there or anything. And I want to kind of smooth these out. So A, I know there's no air bubbles in there. And B, it makes it stronger to have smooth surfaces. Those imperfections you have, like right here, this would be a weak point in the clay. This is basically already a crack, but then I smooth it over and bam, the crack disappears. At this point, I'm going to fold this one over a little bit more, but now I kind of want to start forming it out. So I'm going to bust out my handy dandy spoon. I'm going to use the back part of the spoon to kind of support the interior space as I fold this in a little bit more. You know, the spoon is basically just something that is shaped different than my finger, so it works better for this purpose, especially when I want to make things round. Working that around. I give this a smooth. See that big crack? That's a big bummer. I'll smooth it out. Make sure there's no air bubble in there. Bam. One of the main reasons that clay really blows up in a kiln sometimes too is you just don't let your clay dry enough. Which is not going to be an issue for us because, again, we are going to be able to fire these for sure. But it's going to be a hot second until we can do that. We're probably looking like we're going to get these done, and then you can put them aside, take your pictures of them, make sure they're groovy, and then we're going to fire them, and that means we're going to have to drop them off at school. We're going to have to figure that out, how we do that. So I'm getting there. I'm not going to waste any more of your time watching me make this form exactly the way I want it. That's why I made my exemplar here. Again, remember, this is going to be the bottom of this guy's head. I'm thinking I want his back of his head to slant back a little bit. So it's going to be kind of there. And then I'm going to put a cap on this kind of at the same time that I build maybe his horns. But this is pretty much far enough for today. I'm going to put this guy aside, show you how I do that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to moisten my fingers in this cup, and I'm going to give it a really good coat of water. I know that as I leave this until tomorrow when I work on this again, I know it's going to dry out, especially since I'm putting it in that other bag. And especially since there's like, obviously I can't put a bag in here, so there's going to be a lot of air in there to dry it out. So I'm going to give it on the inside of it and on the outside of it. Give it a good brush down with some water. Get it pretty wet, but you don't want to over wet it. You don't want to make it mud. And remember, the wetter you get it, kind of the more fragile it might become. So you might see like what I just had there, that little crack formed as I started adding this water. That's okay. We can figure that out later. I'm going to put it carefully into my little baggie. Bam. Don't make it quite muddy. Make sure she stays intact. And then make real sure that my Ziploc is fully locked. Now that I know it's fully locked, I'm going to open up just a little corner of it, like so. And I'm going to squeeze out as much of the air in it as I can. You know, I know there's going to be some in there, and that's okay. That's why I give it that good coat of water. Bam. Make sure she's totally sealed again. And then I can put this guy to the side carefully. Remember, at this point, this is going to be really fragile. I'm going to put it to the side and call that a day. I'm not going to make you watch me clean up my surface in here, but remember, this clay, this dust, like, this is terrible for electronics. It's not good to breathe. This clay that we're using, especially if for sure if you got the kits we use, it's not toxic at all. Like, you could eat a bite of it and be totally fine. Would not recommend that, however, because you know it's gross. But it's not good to breathe in. You want to clean this up. That is why we have our sponges. Gonna get it a little wet. I like to keep half of my sponge dry and about half of it wet. Give it a ring. Then I'm going to wipe this surface down. I'm going to do that until it is super duper clean. Do your family, do your guardians, whoever you live with, do the other people a favor. Make sure you're not leaving clay dust all around. You know, especially if you're using, say, your kitchen table to work on this. You know, again, not going to be toxic. It's not anything bad. You just, you know, you don't want it. And also, it's essentially mud. So clean up after yourself. That's all I got to say.